Commerce. It appropriates a total of $204,546,900 and caps the number of authorized full-time equivalent positions at 48. There are basically 4 line items. Line item 1 provides funding for statewide marketing and promotion programs targeting international and domestic visitors, tour operations, travel agents, and travel journalists. Line item 2 provides funding to address the rising costs of travel-related expenses and the additional operational costs. In line item 3, it provides $100 million from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act for broadband infrastructure. According to the Broadband Now, which provides independent research on broadband in the United States, in 2021, Idaho ranked 42nd for the overall strength of its broadband ecosystem, 40th in access to low prices wired broadband plan, and 43rd in the overall broadband speeds. Broadband infrastructure challenges in Idaho can negatively impact the telehealth, remote work, and distance learning. This bill also provides Idaho Broadband Board authority to allocate broadband grants. Line item 4 provides 2 FTP and funding for personnel to manage the broadband infrastructure and appropriates in Senate Bill 1129 as a fiscal year 2023 supplement. As you know, most of this money budget is going towards the building of a broadband infrastructure. This money is going to be spent back on the backs of your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. However, this broadband will be used by your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and even farther on beyond that, depending on what technology has to serve up when we get there. In 2021, House Bill 127 created the Idaho Broadband Advisory Board. The whole purpose of this board is to oversee the money, to make sure the plans are correct, that we're using the money wisely, and that the broadband is built correctly across Idaho. Again, this is the infrastructure. It is estimated that between 18,000 and 100,000 Idahoans lack connections to the broadband. The board will oversee that money. The board will work to strengthen the economic and ecosystem for businesses in our state and ensure access to the broadband infrastructure. Here's a question for you, Senators. If you got a wild idea and decided you wanted to be a dairy farmer, and you moved out to rural Idaho, got your cows and everything else you needed, and then you realized, I need electricity to run my milkers, would you have to go for miles and miles to put in your own electricity? Well, then you'd have to turn around and build a road to get the milk to market? No, because that's part of the infrastructure. That's where the government has come in and partnered with private businesses to build that infrastructure so it's available for businesses to thrive and to flourish. We've created water, sewage, power grids, cell phones, airlines, railroads, and highways. They team up, they build it, the government gets out of the way, and businesses take off. Again, you look at Millad Pass. It used to be a trail. Go look at the history. And now it's a 4-lane highway. Why? Because the business built it, because the people needed it in order for the infrastructure of their business. This is the proper role of government. And with that, Mr. President, debate is open.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President, debate the bill.
Senator Herndon.
I kind of feel like with this appropriation bill, we ought to just rename ourselves Idaho Inc. Because what we're doing is we're entering into business. And if I look back at some of the development of water infrastructure and broadband infrastructure and also electrical infrastructure, the government has not always been involved. And right now we're getting involved by borrowing from, as the senator said, from future generations of Americans. I don't see this as the proper role of government. Also, there's a concern in my mind that broadband is not properly defined. Broadband does not include aerial transmission. If you actually look at the speeds of the correct definition of broadband, this should be fiber. and I doubt that's even included as part of this plan, so I'm going to stand in opposition to this appropriation bill. Thank you.
You're an idiot.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Riggs.
to debate the bill.
You have the floor.
So the Broadband Committee, in fact, a few of us were just at a meeting we had an hour ago discussing this. So our goal with this is actually to put in fiber as much as possible and have speeds up to 100 megabytes up and 100 megabyte down. That is one of the main definitions of broadband, and where possible, we are looking to do that. Wired connections are always more sustainable, long-term, it's a better long-term investment. So most of the monies that will be awarded are done in grants, and these grants will be given to primarily private companies to help facilitate and to help build out the infrastructure throughout the state of Idaho. Idaho is behind the curve, as was mentioned by the senator from 32, on broadband speeds, and what the state's trying to do is to ramp that up and help build out this infrastructure. It'll be good for business, it'll be good for homes, for communities, and a whole lot of other things. We are in the digital environment right now where these things are needed to help our state grow and to help provide these services and the things that people need. So I encourage your support for this. It's a good a bill for our building out our infrastructure in broadband. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Senator Cook, you are recognized to stand and close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank you for the comments and debate from the good senators from District 1 and District 34. There are a few critics of this bill, and some of the critics are saying that the primary function of the Department of Commerce is to aid in the creation of jobs, generating economic growth, creating economic opportunities, and advancing well-being and prosperity of Idaho citizens. A free market system breaks when the government adopts central marketing planning and private handouts in the form of grants as a duty of bureaucracy. And I would ask, really? I want you to think about nuclear power. How many cities can afford to go figure out how to make nuclear power? The government got involved with private industries and paid the bill and figured out how to do nuclear power. At this point in our nation, we have 20% of our power is coming from nuclear. Not to mention all of your water, your power, again, your highways and railways, your batteries, your cell phones, sewage. All of that came because of government teaming up with private businesses. Another critic says this legislation sets the maintenance budget for the Department of Commerce at $98.7 million, growing from the base by 163.6% in the last 3 years. The rate is staggeringly faster than what would be prescribed by inflationary pressures and growth. Well, that is absolutely true. But what we're doing is we're building infrastructure. And so there is a price tag on building something brand new. And that's what we're doing. We are trying to get Idaho to the 21st century so our businesses can grow, can flourish, and move forward. Another critic, Senate Bill 1159 seeks to add another 4 full-time positions to administer more than $335 million in broadband infrastructure grants. These grants come with many federal strings attached, making them complicated to administer. I for one, it being on several different committees, I'm always leery of money that's coming in and what are these strings that are attached. And are they complicated? Well, I think the good senator from District 34 kind of said what the strings are attached. Basically, they are that you must spend the money on those who do not have access to broadband. The second requirement is you must spend the money on those who are underserved. And so I don't think those are too complicated. I think those are pretty straightforward. And yes, it is true we do have 4 full-time positions coming to handle this amount of money to make sure that the private businesses are living up to the contracts that they are signed, that the money was granted to them for. I've looked back in history. This kind of work has been done since Abraham Lincoln. May I just give you a quick history lesson that you might have forgot back in 5th grade? Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railroad Act that gave the money to 2 private companies to create a railway system. The Union Pacific started at the Missouri River and started west. The Central Railroad started in the Sacramento and started east. The idea was that he would meet somewhere. There was money given to them by the private government. Each of them received 12,800 acres free of charge. Each of them were promised $48,000 in government bonds per mile. In the summer of 1869, these 2 companies were nearing each other within miles. But like most private companies, when the federal government gets involved, sometimes they don't get along. And Ulysses S. Grant said, stop. Neither one of you will receive another dime from the federal government until the 2 of you sit down and decide where you're going to meet at. He was afraid that they were going to pass each other in the night. And so they finally agreed, and then on May 10th, as you probably know, in north of Great Salt Lake at Promontory Summit, the Golden Spike was driven through the rails and into the ties. What did it cost the federal government to do this? There was 690 miles of Central Pacific that put in, so they received $33.1 million. The Union Pacific, they put in 1,086 miles. Just one second. And they received $52.1 million. Again, this was in 1867, so huge price tag. Total amount, $85.2 million. By the government getting involved with this, did it stop the railroad business? Did businesses stop progressing? Absolutely not. When the railroad business took, it went crazy. Once we had a line that went from east to west, the goods and services of businesses were able to deliver to the people. This is a good bill. I think we have talked about all of the critics. I think this is a great piece of bill that will allow Idaho to grow. And so with that, I would ask you to consider giving your aye vote for this. And debate is closed. Thank you.
Thank you. Debate being closed, the question before the Senate is, shall Senate Bill 1159 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams.
Mr. President, 60 seconds.
Sir Adams, you have 60 seconds to explain your vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. So a year or 2 ago, when we started working on this broadband infrastructure project, primarily using federal funds, I was supportive. I don't have a problem with the approach. My concern is, after doing some more digging on this, I asked what the life expectancy was for the broadband that we're putting into the ground, even fiber optic, for this price tag, and I was told it was between 25 to 30-year lifespan. Wow. So with all the new technology coming in, like Starlink and all sorts of other different technologies, this may be obsolete in the next 15 years. So I will be voting no.
Kind of like the
Senator Adams
telephones
votes no.
or the RFD, man.
Anton. Burnt. Gerke. Burtonshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog.
Aye.
Foreman. Grove.
Aye.
Guthrie. Harris. Hart.
Mr. President,
Senator Hart,
60 seconds to explain my vote.
60 seconds to explain your vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't see this as a public utility type system. Public utilities are public because there's usually only one opportunity to have one system. For example, you know what? flows downhill. So we can only have one sewage system in a city. We can't have two sewage systems, otherwise there'd be too much conflict. Same thing with highways. So I don't see this as a public utility. I see this as a private business enterprise, and for that reason I'll be voting no.
Sarah Hart votes no.
Hartgen, Herndon,
No.
Just, Blakey, Lee, Lenny,
Mr. President, 60
Sure,
seconds to explain my vote.
You have 60 seconds to explain your vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ronald Reagan said the most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." In my district, I was sent here to try and slow down the growth of government, not unnecessarily accelerate it. So with that, I'll be voting no on this.
Senator Lenny votes no.
Never been in the military, that's for sure.
Lind, Nichols,
Mr. President, 60 seconds.
Senator Nichols, you have 60 seconds to explain your vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to say that, I don't think Abraham Lincoln was $31 trillion in debt, and I'm sure he practiced monetary theory. The gross federal overreach that's occurring and the massive surge in the national debt is going to impact us in a great way as we continue to progress down this road. And when the ARPA funds go away, I am fearful that the state is going to crumble. So for that reason, I am going to vote no.
Senator Nichols
Trump and
votes
decreased
no.
the debt by
Bohanowitz.
7.8 trillion.
Robbie, Ricks,
Aye.
Ruckte, Schroeder, Samaroff, Taylor, Taves, Trakel, Van Orden, Bordenboeken, Winder, Wintrow, Seiderveld, Just,
Aye.
Robbie, Ruckte, Samaroff, Taylor,
Aye.
Taves,
The roll call shows 23 in favor with 10 against and 2 absent. A majority having voted in the affirmative, Senate Bill 1159 has passed the Senate. Is there a correction to title? Hearing none, then the title is approved, and Senate Bill 1159 will be transmitted to the House.